All right. How's it going?
So wait, what were you saying? Somebody on Reddit?
Oh yeah, somebody had a very nice response. I don't know how to play whether we should say people's names or not, because I don't know, But somebody said, well, first off, they had a good point. You were posting about labor and Marx's. You were saying how basically you don't think labor should be abolished. You think labor is actually good, some type of labor. But this person was kind of bringing up a point of it's more of thinking about things from an progression towards play, which is
right. Oh, you do Reddit on your phone?
Well, sometimes that it's self-justified. And
that
not
play
justified.
Is self-justified?
Yeah, so I just think that it's the idea that I don't know, because I'm still trying to understand all this, and I'll be honest, I have a hard time. There's a lot of, I don't know.
Me too, it's tough.
Yeah.
I spent a long time on this week's reading.
Yeah, me too. So, but I think what it is getting at is the idea that the vital needs are satisfied. So everything that you do beyond that is self-justified. You do it for the sake of whatever, because you want to do it, essentially. So it's a movement towards that. And I think what they're trying to say is that your perspective that you're looking at with labor isn't the perspective that Marcuse is looking at it with. That was my understanding. But anyway, so we're talking about One-Dimensional Man. We're finishing up One-Dimensional Man, right? We did the last section, Herbert Marcuse. Mm-hmm. And, we just got right into it, Antushka. How are you?
I'm fine.
That's good.
Busy week, lots of shows.
Yeah, we got a show.
We have a show on Saturday at Dog and Bone in Dripping Springs, Texas.
That's right.
And it might be raining.
God, it's always raining. So we'll be inside again.
Yeah.
We're always inside. We're it's always raining when we go there. Yep. Anyway, it's okay.
But yeah, I have a full weekend. I got Friday, I'm playing at Rustic Tap in Austin. And then Saturday, we're playing at Dog and Bone. And then Sunday, I'm playing at Mozart's in Austin.
Oh, nice. That's awesome. Yeah. Cool.
Yep.
Yeah, no. Ed, do you get the church gig too, right?
Yes.
So people can't go to that.
But I just do sound for that. I have 2 church gigs.
People could go to that though, right?
They could. Yes. I think if they're Methodists, they'll enjoy it the most.
Yeah. You gotta evangelize a little, No.
I don't have to evangelize. I'm not a Methodist.
But anyway, cool. Yeah, that's gonna be fun.
Yeah,
it's gonna be fun. So Saturday show starts at 7, right?
7:30, our show.
Oh, 7:30. Wow.
Yep.
Man.
Oh, yeah. Big difference. If you're not there, don't get there at 7.
Man.
We won't be playing.
But anyway, so I listened to some lectures on Marcuse and also just Marcuse interviews. Mm-hmm. Feel like I have a better understanding, especially now listening back to that last episode. It is funny how much I misunderstood the passivity of existence or pacification of existence. Because you're absolutely right. That's what he is. He is 100% saying that's basically what technological rationalism end is or should be directed towards.
Could be. Doesn't have to be.
Doesn't have to be. But also sometimes it does feel like he says it's almost like if you just let things follow rational basis, then it will achieve pacification of existence, because that's essentially the underlying prerogative of technology is to make nature pacified.
Right.
To pacify nature.
Sure.
And man being a part of nature in this sense.
Right.
But anyway, that was my understanding.
we read 3 chapters this week.
We did? Well, we read the last part in 3 chapters.
Wait, what?
Sorry. I feel like I said when I introduced it that we read the last chapter, but you're right.
It's part 3, which was 3 chapters long, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, okay. Yes. So, is there a way that you would sum up this week's reading? Because it was sort of long and kind of repetitive, but also went kind of far distances.
Yeah, I mean, honestly,
it's a little hard to summarize.
Kind of like what I just said. I feel like that's kind of would be a big summary, that we live in a irrational society right now that has become overbloated, and the technology that led to the great increase in standard of living is now being used to sort of also enslave the population. And this is held in place because the population is now part of the productive apparatus. They're like taking part in the means of production in a sense, which is kind of interesting because that's also kind of what Marx wants, right? But it's a enslaved sort of, it's a delusional sense, But we talked about that in the last chapter, where it's like, because they're not the laborers aren't the beast of burdens anymore. They're not actually doing the physical stuff. Machines are doing that. Instead, they become managerial, and they're technical, and they're thinking about, the productive aspect. So all of this is bad, essentially, and he thinks that it should, we need to go towards a qualitative change in the direction of the pacification of existence, which will occur by letting, as I've already said, technology take its truest rational form, it seems, is what he's saying. But yeah, in terms of how exactly that happens, he's pretty vague on all that. And listening to interviews of him is really interesting because, he definitely is very kind of goading people on in the 60s, the students, to be revolutionary. I mean, he gave a talk in France after like the biggest student protest, I think. So he was definitely a proponent of that. Anyway, I'm ranting. That's how I would summarize it in a long rant.
Right. In a long rant. Right. So I think that there's a few interesting things I picked up this week in terms of how he's constructing his theory. Because I think you're right. It's the basic premise that the modern industrialized society has become a society where our vital needs are being met, and his kind of historical counterfactual. I'm thinking of a jazz contrafact. No. His historical counterfactual is a system in which those vital needs are met, and then people are free from wage labor. They're free from exploitative labor. And what he says is that they will have essentially all free time because vital needs are met, and then people can sort of choose what other needs and desires to meet based on their own prerogative.
Right.
And so what he's saying is that exists currently, and this is in the 60s, that technology, the industrial technological society has advanced far enough that is already here, but that we're not in the state where people have free time. We're actually in a state where people are sort of enslaved by the labor of the ever-growing number of needs, because as the vital needs get met, then these second and third order, quote, needs start piling on that have to do with essentially capitalistic and materialistic interests.
Yeah, which are oppressive.
Right, exactly. And so what he's doing is he's proposing a different world, like what I was saying, where people are free to have leisure, or essentially free to do what they want with their own time because the basic needs have already been met. And then he goes through in these 3 chapters. He talks about the one chapter, the historical commitment to philosophy, where he's talking about the purpose of philosophy. And this is where I spent a long time reading and then listening to lectures about him and interviews, because it seems to me like he goes back and forth, because he attacks certain types of philosophy and he attacks science and rationality. And there's a few questions I had. Let's see, where did I write them down? He uses the words logic, rationality, and reason a lot. Reason he usually capitalizes. And I'm not really sure. I don't know if you had a good sense for how he distinguishes these ideas.
Yeah, well, so with respect to reason, I think he is talking about a specific type, and he references it. So is reason, logic, and what was the third?
Rationality.
Oh yeah, rationality. Yeah. Okay. The new idea of reason. This is on page 228. Mm-hmm. The new idea of reason is expressed in Whitehead's proposition: the function of reason is to promote the art of life. In view of this end, reason is the direction of attack on the environment, which derives from the threefold urge: one, to live well, to live better. Whitehead's propositions seem to describe the actual development of reason as well as its failure, or rather, they seem to suggest that reason is still to be discovered, recognized, and realized. For hitherto, the historical function of reason has also been to repress and even destroy the urge to live well, and to live better, or to postpone and put an exorbitantly high price on the fulfillment of this urge. In Whitehead's definition of the function of reason, so I guess this is of the function of reason, not of reason. The term art, yeah, because then it's talking about it's. So, yeah, but I guess the reason I went there was, it seems like he subscribes to Whitehead's definition of reason. And so I guess this is the thing to sort of answer the three definitions at once. My conception of what he meant by those words was in a very mathematical sense. Like he's a historical materialist. So when I was just reading him, he all over the place seems to point to. Honestly, he feels like he's a positivist. He seems to point to the fact that there is a universal truth that can be deduced with reason and logos, and reason being like A plus B equals C if whatever, or whatever. 2 plus 2 equals 4, I should say.
Right.
Like,
but I think
he means it in the conventional sense. I guess that's what I mean.
Well, I guess I don't have great. Okay, I think that
I could be completely wrong.
I think those are words that are used conventionally in a pretty fuzzy way.
Yeah, because as I say that, it's like I'm sure. I mean, this is the problem, and Reddit definitely just makes me which is good, makes me all the more paranoid. That it's just everything that I say, somebody's gonna be like, "No, that's completely wrong."
But that's fine. But here's the thing: I think we have to be courageous in our statements because we have to be okay with being wrong.
We're so
courageous. Because that's how we're gonna get better at it.
Look at us sitting here courageously behind microphones.
No. I just mean say a statement and maybe it's wrong, and that's fine. It doesn't matter if it's wrong.
I know it's just funny. It's just funny.
So where I see him in this, the reason it's confusing to me is in chapter 8, where he's talking about philosophy and history and sort of the purpose of philosophy and what philosophy is doing. He's talking about these universals and then concrete examples.
What are you doing with your
hands? How a universal class cannot be defined by an example, but an example exists underneath the umbrella. So, it's a basic idea that there's an idea, what does he say, one of like whiteness.
Yes.
And then if you look at a marshmallow, that would be an example of something that is white, but a marshmallow does not define whiteness.
Yeah, it's interesting. He was sounding a lot like Foucault when he was talking about the insane people who see a whole that's greater than the constituents that make up the whole. That's, I think, what he's talking about when he talks about universals. Right.
But then he goes on to talk about the function of philosophy, because he talks about philosophers who do this kind of thing. But then he also says that philosophy has an ideological function. And then there's a quote I highlighted. He says, "To the degree to which the philosophical project is ideological, it is also a historical project."
Right.
And I keep I keep landing on this because I think the way he uses history, I think he's using history in this kind of a special way too.
Yeah, so I think he's using history. That's a great point. What page is that quote on? Because I remember actually
222.
Thinking about that quote and then being like, oh, I think I understand this now. I think
it's right at the top of 222.
Right. I think he uses history in the sense of, in the same sense that Nietzsche uses history, where I think they're talking about just the past experiences and society and all this stuff, just basically all of the sensations that you've taken in, I suppose you could say, or your society has taken in.
Right. And then with it being ideological, there's a little quote I highlighted in the next paragraph where he says, I shall submit only a few propositions which suggest the internal historical character of the philosophic concepts, far from precluding objective reality, defines the grounds for their objective reality, which I think that last bit, defining the grounds for their objective reality, is important to the way that Foucault is operating. Because also listening to some of the interviews, he was talking about how with critical theory, you define the counter history, you define the newly proposed history first, and then from there, you build the entire philosophical framework. So you say there could be a world where people don't have to labor because all their vital needs are taken care of. And now, because of that, what does labor mean? What does consciousness mean? What does true and false mean? And it's all built on the sort of, what is that? Sorry. The objective validities are all built on that proposed alternative history.
Yeah, I think that's actually I think that sounds right to me, but what do I know?
I wish I hadn't tripped in the middle of that.
No,
it was going so well.
No, I think that was very well put, though, is a good way of putting it. And it's like, I was also looking at, because again, yeah, so when it's history, like I'm kind of reading it in on the individual base, it's the individual's past and whatever the narrative that they've kind of told themselves. So you said, what page did you say? Sorry.
What? I was on 222.
Yeah. Is it the top, you said?
Yeah. Maybe we have different page numbers, but I think we have different editions because mine is the second edition. It's after the paragraph that starts, thus the specter of historicism is raised.
Yeah, no, we have different editions. Well, okay. I mean, did you say that didn't make sense, or?
I think it makes sense.
Yeah, okay. Oh, it's the paragraph after that? It's the quest for the criteria?
Yes.
Yeah, I have in the margins, feels here he's saying you can't separate ideological, philosophical projects from thought history, which is dependent on society, which goes back to all those things that like and I were even talking about. Brother X. And I were talking about during the patent episodes and how it was brought up that Marx looks at labor as inherently, or what was it? Was it labor? I don't even remember. It was
labor as social.
Yeah, and it's the idea of just society has molded the individual, so inherently you're a part of that society, which is why it's so hard to break out of the thinking and, I guess as they keep saying, raise the consciousness. Because that is true. Consciousness is reflection upon the state that you're in. It's trying to break outside of the state you're in, which is why I think this is another sort of overlying thing I was thinking as I was reading this, was how this is just another example of, I think, people who are talking about consciousness, but they're just in such a confusing way. But,
Sure.
Yeah, because
I think that Marcuse's writing is extraordinarily confusing.
Well, yeah, and that's a very common criticism of the Frankfurt school is it's esoteric and written in a way that's difficult to understand. And is
it's not the
accessible.
most complicated theoretical writing I've read, but it's definitely up there in terms of it just gets frustrating.
Yeah.
Because every term has a special meaning.
Right. But they talk about like consciousness a lot though. And they talk about raising the consciousness of the worker so that they can again break out of the societal thinking.
Right.
So I thought that was interesting. But yeah, I had this same part underlined. I shall submit only a few propositions which suggest that the internal historical character of the philosophic concepts, far from precluding objective validity, defines the grounds for their objective validity.
Right. And then, I mean, he goes on to talk about the physical versus actual objectivities and things like that. And then a little bit further down, he talks about this concept, which he also talks about in a lot of his interviews, about negative thought.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think it's an important part of his
And I was
theoretical
reading,
construction.
I think it was the Stanford Encyclopedia a little bit more about this. Maybe it was that. Yeah, because it was because I was trying to understand his like dialectical theory better, and I think that negative thinking or the negation stuff is apparently, I think that's his application of the dialectic, I think.
Right. Yes, yeah. I think that's right. Because he even talks about Hegel with respect to that too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and he talks about Nietzsche before that part in the contemporary philosophy has rarely attained a more authentic formulation of the conflict between its intent and its function. The linguistic syndrome of loveliness, aesthetic sense, and desert landscape evokes the liberating air of Nietzsche's thought, cutting into law and order, while the breeding ground for disorderly elements belongs to the language spoken by the authorities of investigation and information. It's that same idea, and he goes on to elaborate on this when he's talking about art and sort of the purpose, which gets to this thing you're talking about with negative. Art is like the negative to, I guess, the society, but it's I posted that one quote, which was, let me try to find it, but it was saying, basically, as irrationality increases in society, you will see rationality increase in the sphere of art. Mm-hmm. And because it's this kind of dialectic thing, it's this counterbalance. And so that's why he's saying, like, at that time, you can read the works of certain people, and that speaks more truth than the actual authorities who are supposed to be speaking truth. The poets are speaking the truth.
Right.
So
I think, though, he also has this space. We talked a little bit about it last time, about how it's sort of a recursive theory or something, where he talks about the objective ambiguity, which is the meeting point of the positive and the negative. He talks about it in the next chapter, and there's
I remember that, actually.
Right, and he says the objective ambiguity, which he calls the happy marriage of the positive and the negative, which adheres to the data of experience. It is objective ambiguity because of the shift in my sensations and reflections responds to the manner in which the experienced facts are actually interrelated. Critical thought strives to define the irrational character of the established rationality, which becomes increasingly obvious, and to define the tendencies which cause this rationality to generate its own transformation.
See, he's talking about consciousness there. This is where, exactly. Thank you for pointing this out. When I say he's talking about conscious in a confusing way, this is the example. 227, one-dimensional man, edition, whatever the hell this edition is. What edition is this? Probably, you said yours is the second. Maybe mine's the first. I just want it to stand for posterity.
How many introductions do you have?
Too many. That's another thing.
Wait, really?
I don't know how many I do.
I have 2 introductions in mine.
No, this is the first edition. No.
Nice.
This is the second edition.
Oh. Well, then we just have different editions of the second edition.
Well, anyway. Yeah, I think you're right. Sorry. Yes, I think he's just. Don't you think he's just talking about reflection and consciousness here? When he's saying critical thought, this is where I'm saying it's like, why do you have to label it?
Well, critical thought is thought that is designed as a negative thought against an existing system.
Against the norm, exactly. And this is why I'm saying it's an analogous thing to say. It is consciousness, because that's, again, what consciousness is. Consciousness is kind of the negative to, I guess you could say, the animal body in some sense. This is where I'm trying to get at. You know,
I see.
It reflects upon itself. And this is essentially what critical theory is. It's a reflection upon itself being the normative society.
So I feel like we just read something and you just go, you just pick a paragraph and you're like, that's what I'm talking about. That's consciousness right there. Like, we could be reading a recipe for an apple pie and you'd be like, that's it right there. You see it?
That doesn't make sense.
I don't know. It doesn't not make sense. It seems pretty different than the other things you call consciousness. So I think I'm not understanding the totality of your philosophy.
Maybe I'm making it confusing.
We should read Mr. X's multi-dimensional man.
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't know. Okay. Critical thought strives to define the irrational character. The irrational character for me here is the animal character of humanity. Uh-huh. The irrational character of the established rationality. But it's, this is the society. This is the irrational society that you live in.
So the established rationality for him is the system, the powers that be. Right.
But he's talking about using reason and logic to overcome the irrational rationality of the current system, and the analogous, like, nature example. Right. Nature's chaotic, and it's our conscious duty to take the chaos and add order to it. This is consciousness's prerogative. So this is why I see everything he's saying through the guise of consciousness, because I think his whole theory is underpinned and much more simply put if you just talk about it in the context of consciousness. Of like, look, we're trying to get people to reflect upon their stature more. This is increasing consciousness. And we're trying to be creative and project in and be creative and come up with new technologies. This is consciousness. This is what he talks about with sort of the rational art. The aspect of rational art, I think is what he was saying, is art has a utility, in a sense, to be able to think about things that don't actually exist, but then you can bring them into existence with science. But anyway, that is consciousness. That projection into the not present is consciousness. Mm-hmm. It's all conscious.
I think
everything
it's all,
he's talking about is talking about it, using the tools of consciousness to bring them about. So why not just talk about that more uniformly? I guess
everything he's talking about is using the consciousness of the tools.
How about that, Antushka? All right, I'll sit down.
But then,
I'm sitting down.
Is that a reduct? Could you reduce that to?
I can't hear you anymore.
Anything? Oh no, you can't. Uh-oh. How about now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay. Sorry, I had the wrong microphone input going the whole time.
Did the other stuff?
No, it's fine, because it's fine going into Logic, just into Zoom. Anyway, so is that an argument that you can just reduce all the way to everything is about consciousness, and so the only thing anybody should ever be talking about is about consciousness?
It's about leaning into consciousness.
So if somebody's like, hey, let's go get sushi, you could say, yeah, but let's just talk about consciousness, because that's using the tools of consciousness.
But what I'm saying is he's trying to get people to do something. And what I'm saying is what he's trying to get people to do is increase their consciousness.
Right. Okay. But I don't know that you and he, I don't know that you and he are on the same page about what consciousness is.
I think we are.
Uh-huh. Well, because he's definitely a little bit critical of the notion of scientific materialism with respect to mind.
With respect to what?
Mind?
A little bit, yeah. Well, I don't know if he is actually. Is he? I remember you're right. He does bring it up, but I can't remember if I felt like he was negative.
I have a note that says, ask Mr. X about this. So maybe we can go back to that maybe.
Yeah. No.
Okay.
You want to talk about that? Yeah.
Sure. Okay. So it's paragraph and a half. So
and I think he's a materialist generally, so we can read his definition of materialism after this.
Sure. Okay. So this is when he's talking about the qualities, as you know, there's universal categories, and there's specific examples. And then here's a little passage. The description is of precisely that metaphysical character which positivistic analysis wishes to eliminate by translation, but the translation eliminates that which was to be defined. There are many more or less satisfactory technical definitions of beauty and aesthetics. So he's talking about the example of beauty as a category.
Yes, trying to
and then there's
it.
People that try and come up with technical definitions of beauty. Beauty is something we experience, and we know it when we experience it, but it isn't it isn't universalizable very easily because people's experience of it is different and people's categorization of it is different. Anyway, so he says the positivists are trying to create technical definitions, but there seems to be only one which preserves the experiential content of beauty and which is therefore the least exact definition. Beauty as promesse de bonheur, which I looked that up, and what does that mean? Do you remember?
No.
It means, I looked it up yesterday, the promise of happiness, which is an interesting thing. It captures the reference to a condition of men and things and to a relation between men and things which occur momentarily while vanishing, which appear in as many different forms as there are individuals, and which, in vanishing, manifest what can be. So everybody has their own unique perspective on beauty, and it's an experience that's gone as soon as it happens. It's ephemeral. Excuse me. Continuing. The protest against the vague, obscure, metaphysical character of such universals, the insistence of familiar concreteness and protective security of common and scientific sense still reveal something of that primordial anxiety which guided the recorded origins of philosophic thought and evolution from religion to mythology and from mythology to logic.
Which is consciousness. Read that back to me. Where is that again? Sorry.
It's 2:15 for me, so 17, 18 for you?
Yeah.
Like that.
What's the start of the paragraph?
The protest against the vague, obscure, metaphysical character of such universals, the insistence on familiar concreteness, and the protective security of common and scientific sense will still reveal something of that primordial anxiety which guided the recorded origins of philosophic thought in its evolution from religion to mythology and from mythology to logic.
Yeah. So
yes, he's drawing a historical lineage, religion to mythology, mythology to logic, and he's talking about that process being there to alleviate a primordial anxiety. The positivistic attempt to pin down something like beauty into something concrete.
Yes,
it's consciousness. So consciousness is trying to rein it in and call it neurons or something.
Reification,
like that.
Exactly. Reification.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, the protest against the vague, obscure, metaphysical character of such universals. This is the animal instincts.
Right. So what I'm saying is that consciousness is a vague and obscure thing.
No.
It isn't a pin.
I think he's saying that consciousness is protesting against the vague, obscure thing. He's saying the
true consciousness, perhaps, because he also has false consciousness.
Well, that's a misbelief, yeah. That's like,
right.
I thought that's the belief. That's if you believe that things are one way, but they're not actually that way or something. I don't know.
Right.
Anyway, yeah, but that's, I think, in a different context. And this is, again, getting at the point where I think he's muddying the water of consciousness by giving it different labels like that.
Well, so I don't think he's calling this consciousness at all.
I'm telling you, he isn't directly, but it is essentially what he's talking about, I think. The protest against the vague, obscure, metaphysical character of such universals. And again, because the universals are these things that are undefinable, just like they're the emotions. You feel them. You can't define it. And then what is the protest against that? It's the logic, rationality of consciousness.
It's trying to pin it down. It's trying to
tries to pin it down, exactly. That's all I'm saying.
Right. What I'm saying is that I would call consciousness one of those vague universals that are not pinned down a bull, and that the scientific method is trying to do that.
Yes, it is. It hasn't pinned itself down yet, but consciousness is doing that. Because, again, it's a recursive thing.
Right.
Yeah. But you're right. It hasn't pinned itself down yet. We're trying to, though.
We're trying to. Yeah.
Lord knows I am.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Okay, so he goes through all this stuff.
Well, hang on. Let me read, because you're right. So I think you're getting at a very good point that raises up some confusion. But ultimately, I think he is pushing. This is where I think he's confused, because everything he's talking about here, he then goes and starts to, it feels like, Loud's consciousness. I'm telling you guys, I guess. He raises it up. Loud, L-A-U-D.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Whatever, man. I can't pronounce things. We know this. So, and I can't spell very well either. I'll just come out and say it.
I also can't spell well. I'm a terrible speller.
Yeah. So, I think he starts to... Well, okay, so 227, or 237, sorry. In my edition, at least. My edition's a little bit, actually, a few pages before yours, if you want to find it. Probably 2 pages before. He has a definition about materialism, which I think he seems to be saying this is all a good thing and what he agrees with. And before all this, history is the negation of nature. He's talking about reason and nature.
Yep.
And to the degree which the goal of pacification determines the logos of technics.
Right.
So I've already talked about that. Nature is technology's primary objective, and it's pacification. So materialism, which is not tainted by ideological abuse of the soul, has a more universal and realistic concept of salvation. It admits the reality of hell only at one definite place here on earth and asserts that this hell was created by man and by nature, in parentheses. Part of this hell is the ill treatment of animals, the work of a human society whose rationality is still the irrational. Right. So he is a materialist. He feels this way. And I'm just saying to him, I guess, then, this is consciousness right here. Materialism is a result of consciousness. It is that desire to try to pin things down, because Marx wrote, his whole thesis was, I think, talking about like the atomization theory that the ancient Greeks had. That was thought to be the antecedent to materialism. The idea that you can atomize the world. And they all are subscribers of this. So what I'm saying is that's consciousness.
Okay, I think I'm lost again. I understand everything you're saying other than the word consciousness. So when I'm reading Marcuse say consciousness, I think he means awareness, approximately.
Yes.
And so when you say consciousness, you mean something bigger than that, right?
No, but I mean, what's the fundamental mechanism of awareness?
I don't know. I don't know what that means.
Yeah.
Well, what is it? Do you have the answer?
I don't know.
Oh.
But I think...
I don't think we're going to get a lot of hits on Reddit with this one either.
No, probably not, but I don't care. People need to hear this. People need to hear this, damn it. Okay? No, I think it's association, I think. This is the Hebbian model. We've talked about this before.
The fundamental, what did you say?
The
mechanism of consciousness is association.
And awareness is association of things. So, and by doing this, it builds a loop of neurons that are associated for various reasons. And I think this association is what allows recursion to happen, which is somehow then you are able to think on top of the system. So when I say consciousness and awareness, I'm thinking about recursion and thinking about oneself. And what this allows is thoughts, projection. And this is why we've talked about consciousness before on a spectrum of present to basically not present. The more not present you are, the more conscious you are, is how I think about it, at least.
Right.
So the more you're projecting out of the present and theorizing and thinking about things and whatever, the more conscious you are. And so I think that all of materialism, again, and all of this is it's discretizing the moment. And we've had a debate about this, but I also think that consciousness discretizes the moment. And it's trying to discretize everything. It's trying to discretize space. So this is why materialism is sort of an increase in conscious thought. If you're a conscious person, you're probably going to be a materialist. Maybe that's what I'm trying to say. If you are at a certain level of consciousness, you probably have materialistic tendencies because that seems to be a fundamental attribute of the system of logic that underpins consciousness. And the system of logic is a system of association.
Do you think a system of logic underpins... You think logic is before consciousness?
I think association is logic.
Okay.
And yes. So, yes. And then logic leads to consciousness. Yes, I think logic precedes consciousness because you can have autonomous logical systems like the reflex arc. And I've talked about this too, how I think the reflex arc is kind of a good way of starting to understand consciousness from a materialist setting because it's like it's the most simple loop of you have a sensory input and then a motor output. You know, you hit the knee and then the knee does something. And then consciousness is just a bunch of neurons in between.
A lot of knees.
It's a lot of just like loops of different things. Right. And so the logic comes from, I think, when you have loops that are associated with each other probably or something like that. Right. But it's within this system where it's like, 2 and then another 2 is equal to 4. All of these things are associated with one another.
Right.
So which is why
logic is association.
Yes. And the fundamental mechanism of consciousness is association. I think I'm an association.
And you think Marcuse is saying this?
I think that he subscribes to all this without overtly thinking.
Right. But don't you think that everybody we've read subscribes to all that?
Yes, exactly.
So why am I the only one who doesn't?
Why are you the only one who doesn't think that?
Yeah. Because I feel like I'm the only person in the world who doesn't subscribe to this from talking to you.
Oh.
Like every philosopher is like... They all just agree with you.
Wait, you don't think they subscribe to that, or you don't subscribe to that?
I have no idea if they subscribe to that. I don't subscribe to it.
I got you. Well, yeah, maybe. You could
maybe it's just
You
me.
could be a lone person, or you could be confused.
I could be confused. I think I am confused. I can tell you I'm confused.
Yeah. Well, I agree. And this is something I have written about it. If you want to listen on Substack, you can go to it.
Yeah.
I won't tell you how to get to it, but you can go to it. But I have written about it. But it's true. Part of the reason I came out with this was a little bit to be funny, right? Mm-hmm. Obviously, I don't expect Marcuse to be thinking the same way that I do, but I'm just trying to make a point that I think that they are all thinking this way. I think actually you are as well, because this is the insidious thing with my theory, Anthony.
It's just that you can't escape it.
You can't escape it. This that we're doing right now, this is leaning into consciousness right here. You're doing it.
Right. No, I just don't. It's more that I don't subscribe to the idea that I mean, I guess you can call logic whatever you want. You can call consciousness whatever you want.
Oh, you don't think what?
I guess I wouldn't call logic and consciousness those things.
Oh, well, that's fine. I don't care.
Right.
I mean, this is the definition thing. What I'm trying, you should subscribe to your own theory here, mister.
No, I agree with you. I agree with that's why I have a hard time arguing it, because I think there's this other thing that can happen, though. Because if I'm talking about God, and I keep talking about God, and what I mean is an apple pie, it's a really weird thing to do. Now, I'm not saying you're going that far. But if I say, like, I'm going to bake up some God this afternoon, and then I'm like, keep talking about that, and then I say, like, every cookbook is just constantly talking about God. Mm-hmm. It's a weird thing to do. And then I go, well, no, but I mean this thing that you put apples in and bake up.
That's because consciousness is the frame of everything. So I can always relate it back to that, unfortunately. But we're specifically talking about philosophical things, which are always talking about consciousness.
Right.
In my opinion, philosophy's whole thing is the manifestation of consciousness trying to understand consciousness. That's what it is. That's what philosophy is for me.
Right. Consciousness trying to understand consciousness.
Yes.
But even including critical philosophy and other kinds of philosophy he was talking about.
And again, the critical philosophy is a great manifestation of consciousness, and this freeing, and again, Rose Wilder Lane. It's all of this idea of trying to free itself from whatever the norm is and reflect upon it. That's like the conscious, it seems like, thought. Anyway, we've been talking about this for too long.
I mean, I'm just thinking about it. I just wrote down philosophy is consciousness trying to understand consciousness. I actually wish that a question like this would work on Reddit, because I want to know how people respond to it, because I think I need to hear more thoughts on it. People
don't understand me.
That's fine. They don't understand me either. Have you seen the responses to my posts?
But they respond to you. This is the thing, is I actually don't elicit much response from people. Anyway, but it's fine. We don't have to get into this. Yeah, but it's fine. I actually think part of it's because I don't want a response too. I swear, it's because I don't want a response.
I want a response because I want to think about it more, and I'm having a hard time even wrapping my head. It's like when I say I don't agree with you, I don't even know that I don't agree with you.
Well, that's okay. We'll keep talking about it, and I should say we have episodes about this if anybody's interested. I mean, the most direct, I feel like, where we're talking about the consciousness stuff is in the what was it, the thalamic reticular.
Sure.
What? When we were talking about the thalamus and the reticular activating network of the thalamus, and consciousness, that's where I think I talk a lot about the consciousness stuff.
Right.
Which you're right. I talk about it from a materialist setting, which again is why I think he would agree with the standpoint, and which I kept kind of getting at. Whereas it almost feels like he has positivist settings, and I was reading a little bit about the positivist debate, right? Because there's this whole debate, and honestly, I shouldn't even brought it up because I'm going to read more about it, and I maybe talk about it more next episode, because I'm still a little bit confused, but I can't help but feel like he is a positivist.
Interesting.
But I know that was levied against the critical rationalists or something. I don't know. Anyway, I'm getting all these freaking names mixed up because they're all new to me, you know. So, but yeah, positivism, it just seems to be I was also trying to get a good definition of that. It just seems to be like thinking that there's a universal truth.
Mm-hmm.
And fundamentally, I mean, there's other parts to it. But then, I was asking a friend who who's actually a professor now.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Believe it or not. And they were telling me how, they associate positivism with, like, eugenics, and that's why they don't like it. I was like, is that the logical end to it? I don't even know. But, that's what...
Well...
yeah, I mean, now, you don't like Wikipedia definitions, I know, but, the Wikipedia definition, Antushka, holds that all genuine knowledge is either true by definition or positive, meaning a posteriori facts derived by reason and logic from sensory experience. So it's like, it's kind of a type of empiricism, it feels like, which is actually when I was talking to them about this, because I was like, I feel like I am a positivist probably. Like, I think I subscribe to that. But then more...
Well, because, like, rationalists are different. And, like, Ayn Rand is a rationalist who says that things are not true based on experience. Experience has nothing to do with it. Things are true based on rational formulation.
Right. But this is where it's like it gets into, what are the antecedents to that? And this is where I feel like you always come back to sensation. And which is why I think fundamentally I'm an associationist or an empiricist. Because I do think that, sensory perception forms the basis of our mind, plus obviously genetic components.
Right.
But for the most part, it's the sensory perceptions that we take in that drive our mental faculties and what makes our consciousness. And I do think I have, I feel like there is a universal truth that can be at least sought at. Whether or not it exists, it can be sought, if that makes sense. Much like, kind of like integral calculus, or the derivative, I should say.
Like trying to approach infinity but not get there?
Yes, exactly, the limit.
Right.
It's like a trick of the mind.
Right.
But anyway, I do feel like we've probably got off from Marcuse because there's a lot of interesting things. I have a bunch of things starred.
Yeah.
But all of that, just to put a bow on the conversation, this is how I feel like he starts off by, I agree, when you were reading, it's a little bit of a denigration of almost, it sounds like, the logical thought.
Right.
And science. But then he goes forth and talks about how there is, like, it seems like if you let technology be unencumbered by outside forces, it will develop into, and it will fulfill the pacification of existence. And I should find a...
Right, because he talks about what the scientific project will be in the pacified society, and it's trans-utilitarian.
Right.
So it's not science trying to achieve some systemic end.
Right.
It's pretty funny because I read the world that he's proposing, and it sounds like a university to me.
Yeah,
it's like it's this thing. It's like we can see a little bit of it. We can see like what happens in university music departments. They make weird music that nobody likes and nobody cares about. And what happens in various university research disciplines that have no market forces behind them. They just study weird stuff that doesn't matter. And I think that's what he wants. Like everybody has tenure in his world.
Yeah, no, it's
universal tenure.
Yeah, I mean it's true, and I wouldn't go so far to say that he's certainly an ivory tower academic,
right.
But he lived through a crazy
He's also bloodthirsty
experience. Well, he did live through Germany going through the Nazification,
right? And
he fled, and he was actually part of the OSS,
nice.
Which I found very fascinating. Which, of course, was the
precursor to the CIA, right?
Exactly.
You didn't know that? I thought we talked about that. Maybe we did.
Did we talk about that? I didn't.
Maybe I just mentioned it anyway.
That was pretty funny to read.
Yeah,
I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there are all those conspiracies about how the CIA fomented all the unrest in the '60s to I don't even know why they destabilized things. I guess maybe get attention off what they were doing. I don't know. Anyway, I don't actually know what those conspiracies are. But yeah, anyway, it's interesting because he had a tough life. That's all I'm trying to say.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you're right, though, is that he was bloodthirsty, and you can hear that in the way he talks in some of his speeches in the 60s and 70s. And yeah, I mean, he was friend with Walter Benjamin, who killed himself, right? Because he was going to be hauled off to Germany.
Right.
So he committed suicide in Spain. So, I mean, he lost friends. He was very directly affected. I think he lost a brother in Auschwitz or something, or a concentration camp, So I can understand his bloodthirstiness, but you raise a good point, though, that this stuff should be read with the understanding that this is a man who's probably got a lot of anger at the world.
Right. But this is
what you're trying to say?
I mean, that's not what I was trying to say, but I think it's true. I also think that different than Marx, he's couching everything in this highly academic language. And part of what I was getting at before when I was saying it's confusing and it's difficult to read, I think that there is I don't know, it's hard to put my finger on, and it's a little bit mind reading, so it's a little bit unfair of me. But I see it in the academic world where people are saying, highly revolutionary, highly brutal things, but couching them in neutered language that is beyond complex. It's this recursive string that blah 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 blah. They're doing a trick. They're essentially doing a magician's trick. They're tricking you with all these words, and what they're saying is very simple. The conclusion, it doesn't have to even be 12 pages. It's essentially Marx. It's just a little update.
Yes, yeah. In that he is kind of calling for action, but just But that's an interesting point. Is that it's a much less overt call to action than Marx.
But the outcome is the same. The idea is essentially the same. It is that capitalism is going to be the driving force, which will create the situation in which he doesn't call it the proletariat anymore because he says the whole proletariat thing is ended, but it'll create the situation in which the oppressive structure need not be anymore.
Yeah, the underclass, which in his case he was saying are like the minority class, a lot of the case in the modern society.
Right, and the only way to get there is through violent revolution.
Right. Yeah, so it's interesting because listening to interviews, and granted, he distances himself more, I would say, as time went on. Like in his 1977 interview with McGee. I think that was his name.
Yep.
Brian McGee. He very much basically, he says very overtly, like, I was in no way really involved with these students. It was just kind of happenstance that they read my book and felt the need to, do the things that they were doing. But then you listen to him talk. I mean, you see that he was going to some of these protests and speaking at them and speaking to students. I mean, one of the interviews I heard was with students in like 1964 when One Dimensional Man just came out.
Right.
And then he was also apparently coaching, or not coaching, but he was like, he had a student, Avery, what's her name? Avery Chamberlain? Yeah. No. There was basically a sort of revolutionary student that he mentored and I think helped get out of trouble and stuff when he was at San Diego. I can't remember the name.
Right.
off the top of my head. But anyway, the point is it's interesting because you're right. He was very evasive in how he was talking, I would say, in his book about revolution. But I think he was, no doubt, wanted that to happen.
I mean, and we'll read it also in Repressive Tolerance, but it's very similar to other Marxist and critical style writings where there's an argument that seems sort of reasonable on its face about critiquing oppressive structures. Everybody's like, yeah, we like to critique oppressive structures. That sounds good. And then you start to get into this thing where if you start defining the oppressive structure and then the critique can be violent revolution against it, now that you've actually opened up sort of moral permission to do all sorts of things, like all sorts of revolutionary acts. And I'm not even saying you shouldn't do them, but it feels to me like he's hiding behind something. And it's also the question of what does the world look like that he is proposing? Because he even talks about it. There's a centralized state in his world.
Yeah, he says it can be a mix, but yes, he thinks some form of centralization. And
central economic planning is crucial.
Well, but he also says that there can be some democratic representation, and that there's a mix that could be conceived.
Right.
Being a proportion of that can be conceived, which is essentially what the U.S. is in some sense. Though we can quibble about the ratio of centralized control to democratic representation, Antushka. But yeah, and then, low population, that was another critical thing, not critical, I can't even use that word anymore. Crucial thing that he said.
Yes.
Because it gets at the central idea that a free society is one where privacy is valued and given, and you just can't. He's basically saying you can't have privacy if there's a lot of people, which I guess in some sense is true.
I don't know. Yeah, I remember that. It was not. It didn't land that hard for me.
Well, it would take a lot of people, I think, before privacy. Like more things would probably become an issue before, like, we literally were on top of each other.
Right.
If the spatial quota of the Earth was fulfilled, I think we'd have other issues before that happened. Right. But he says it is central.
Right. I think I basically disagree with him on what he thinks individual liberty is and authentic self-determination and things like that. I think that's where, like, when we get to the conclusion, sort of at the end of all of it, I think that I don't think that he and I are going in the same direction.
Well, I think that he is a bit utopian and vague. And I mean, this was actually in some of the Reddit responses. This was actually a lot of responses to when you were talking about, like, the abolition of labor and stuff. And I kind of feel this way of, like, it does feel a little bit idealistic to think that we could ever, even at peak technological innovation, not have any work that was not self-fulfilling or whatever. It's like...
right.
What's the...
So exploitative labor is a big term that they use. Wage labor is exploitative labor. Marx writes about how free labor is bad because free labor means that you as an individual are free to sell your labor, which is not good.
Yeah, I meant to say self-justified, that person had said. And I feel like I had meant to give them credit, too. It's A0.
Okay.
But yeah, that this person... I thought that was a good way of putting it. It's this because it's this progression towards play, and play is self-justified. And so it's the idea that I wonder if that is actually possible to have a state where everything is self-justified and nothing, all the vital needs are satisfied.
What is self-justified?
I think it's a good question, but this is a good point. I'm interpreting that to mean that it is justified because you want to do it and not because you have to do it.
Right.
Like, you have to eat. That's a vital need.
But Marcuse even talks about that. Even that, to a point, is a narrative. You can die.
He talked about that? Where did
it
he
was
talk
in
about
it was
that?
in an interview somewhere.
Oh, well.
But, know, the depths of you have to eat, it's not even that deep. You can die.
You can die, it's true. But in terms of, I guess, maybe the next level.
Right.
After that.
You have to live and you have to die. Those are the only two things you have to do.
Right. There's a few things I thought were worth pointing out. He has an interesting criteria for objective historical truth on page 220. And he has basically 5 points, I guess. 2 points and then 3 subpoints. The transcendent project must be in accordance with the real possibilities open at the attained level of the material intellectual culture. The transcendent project, in order to falsify the established totality, must demonstrate its own higher rationality in threefold sense that, 1, it offers the prospect of preserving and improving the productive achievements of civilization. 2, it defines the established totality in its very structure, basic tendencies, and relations. And 3, its realization offers a greater chance for the pacification of existence within the framework of institutions which offer a greater chance for the free development of human needs and faculties. So that's a way he's saying you can judge things based off of these criteria about whether they're good or not, essentially. And of course, the present society fails in many of these respects, because it's. Although I guess maybe it is because he basically does think this is another thing he says a lot, is that the technical apparatus needs to be maintained. If there, and when he's talking about transcendent project, right? He's talking about, I guess, the new state of sorts or whatever. If I don't know if state's the right word, but it's the new enterprise of society, the new way society is being structured, or whatever I guess the way the society is being structured. So the transcendent project in in the capitalist sense, I think. He then says, I believe that the very concept of reason originates. Obviously this notion of rationality contains, especially in the last statement, a value judgment. And I reiterate what I stated before. I believe that the very concept of reason originates in this value judgment, and that the concept of truth cannot be divorced from the value of reason. I thought that was a very interesting thing that I think is worth pondering, that I don't fully understand, because I think we probably missed it when reading. But I think that's kind of an interesting point and hits at a lot of what you were asking about.
Can you read it again?
I believe that the very concept of reason originates in this value judgment. And so the value judgment, he's talking about this last statement in those criteria of objective historical truth. And its realization offers a greater chance for the pacification of existence within the framework of institutions which offer a greater chance for the free development of human needs and faculties. So I think the value judgments may be saying that you want the pacification of existence. I don't know. Is that how you read it?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a little circular again. I don't know. It's a little.
And then I believe that the very concept of reason originates in this value judgment, and that the concept of truth cannot be divorced from the value of reason.
Right. So this is the thing: is there isn't objective truth outside of the idea of true consciousness, which truth is all pointing towards this thing. So he's as I understand it, he's essentially defining truth to be in accordance with that which that of his critical world that he wants.
The pacification of existence.
That's the true stuff.
Yeah.
The other stuff is false.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's probably a good way of thinking about it. Yeah. So And then pacification, free development of human needs.
Right,
I
right.
think we understand that. This is historical these concepts can be empirically defined in terms of the available intellectual, material resources and capabilities, and their systematic use for attenuating the struggle for existence.
Right.
This is the objective ground of historical rationality.
Yeah, I mean, I just think he's wrong about that, but yes.
Yeah. So other interesting things I wanted to bring up.
Well, what do you think about that? If we pause there for a second, what do you think about the idea that vital needs can be objectively determined?
Yes, I think they can be.
How?
Well, if you define vital in the sense of you need them or else you die, I think that you can create a hierarchy as Maslow has, you know. And yeah, I think we have done this because that's what you do when you go into a hospital.
But like Marcuse's higher vital needs is more than that. Because to be able to play, you need an amount of wealth. You need higher level subsistence than just pure survival.
Yeah, he hasn't obviously done a hierarchy, and I agree. I think his definition is a little bit larger than mine.
Right.
But we both agree that I think they can be quantified.
Right. It reminds me a little bit of during COVID when people were talking about, closing unnecessary businesses, or that wasn't the word they used. I don't remember the word, but it's this kind of thing about only necessary activities. And it seems that when we're talking about, the functioning of society, it's what does necessary mean? What are we talking about?
Right. Well, and the thing he's getting at is that a lot of this, I think, is infected with outside interests of money, of wealth generation that has become divorced from reality, which is what creates the rational system. So it's like, yeah, you can maybe have things that happen, and then you realize there was a monetary incentive for that to happen.
Right.
Like the opiate epidemic, for instance. And I mean,
I just think he's naive. He's completely deluded if he thinks that you can objectively determine the vital needs.
You keep saying that, but I keep telling you how you can, and then all you do in response is just say how you think it's naive.
Well, I'm going to keep going because he's talking.
You haven't told me. You haven't refuted.
Because he's not talking about you just need food and shelter. He's talking about you need a society that's set up so that you don't have to labor. So nobody has to farm who doesn't want to farm. But on the other side of it, nobody has more than they need. So nobody has, an extra ear of corn in their house that they're going to throw away. And nobody has extra space. And then this is the thing. It just, like, you can see the direct path from this into, like, weird Soviet Union stuff, which is where he talks about how he doesn't like the Soviet Union. But you can see how his idea that people need enough so that they can, have free time all the time, but not too much so that they're not taking anything from anybody else is just an absolutely impossible thing. And so he's saying that it can be objectively judged. I don't understand. I'm not talking about Maslow. I'm talking about him.
No, I know. I think you are talking about two different things, though. Objectively quantifying the vital needs versus having a system that...
Didn't he just say objectively quantifying something like the vital needs? I'm responding to what you just read.
I'm just saying the two things are slightly different. It's the objectively quantifying vital needs is a subset of the system. You need to do it in order to have the system, but believing that you can quantify the objective needs and believing that you can have a system that is divorced of labor are two different things. That's all I was trying to say. You can believe that you can... It doesn't matter. But anyway, okay.
Right.
You're more confused.
I am.
All I'm trying to say is that because I agree with you in some sense. That's why I'm trying to distinguish this. I agree that I think it's idealistic to have a system where you can have all your needs satisfied. but I also think that you can't quantify your vital needs.
Right.
That's what I'm trying to say. So I
I guess.
with both
I
of you
mean,
is
what is
I'm
the
trying
point
to
of saying
say.
vital need? Maybe now I'm thinking like if you need it or you don't need it.
Well, I agree. It's to
So
what
is vital
end,
need
what
is
does
a
it matter?
tautology,
And,
right? It doesn't. You don't need both words.
well, but I mean, there is plenty of reasons why you would want to quantify your vital needs outside of having them fulfilled autonomously.
I'm saying don't even worry about quantifying.
the-
I'm saying the term vital needs is a tautology, right? All needs are vital if they're needs.
Yeah, it's an oxymoron, is what
Right.
you're saying. Yeah, I would agree with
So
that.
do we need it or do we not need it?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I think maybe we should. Okay, so let's focus then on
Right.
where we agree, and that it's an idealistic idea to think that you can have all your needs satisfied, and that you won't have to do anything that is not play.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not even saying
is
that. But yes,
essentially-
I agree, but that's not quite what I'm saying. But yes.
Well, that's what you were saying on Reddit, it seemed. When you were saying that you couldn't have abolition of labor, that's how I was interpreting it.
So I think that, yes, you can't abolish labor. That's naive. But I think that my more potent point is you don't want to abolish labor.
Well, and actually that is very interesting, and where I might not
It's like you
agree.
don't want the egalitarian society.
Yeah. Well, it gets into this question of, is life suffering? I think it gets into a
Right.
very fundamental philosophy where some people think it is and some people think it's not.
Right.
But I think that's touching
Yeah,
on
maybe.
Because if you think life is inherently suffering, then of course you wouldn't ever think that there could be an abolition of labor.
Right. I don't think life is all suffering, but I think suffering is
You're a
intrinsic
Buddhist,
to
admit it.
consciousness. Not conscious things don't suffer.
Exactly, because
Right.
you're not aware of it. Yeah.
Right. As far as I know, rocks don't suffer.
As
Right,
far
exactly.
as you know.
Yeah. No. Okay. So I agree that you can quantify needs in a certain domain. So to stay alive, here's what you need, or to get a job at the bank, here's what you need.
Yeah. Well, but I'm saying you can quantify it in the sense that you need a certain amount of calories to live. You need to,
I agree.
have a certain amount of bowel movements to live, right?
Right.
They're like, you need to do certain things to live. You need to breathe. You need a certain amount of
Right.
oxygen in your blood.
Yeah,
Those
to
are
achieve this
quantifiable.
end, you need these things. Yes. So
Yes.
to achieve whatever universal, everybody has food. There's no hunger. We need this amount of food distributed to these many people. I think that's
Right.
true. You can do that. I agree. It's what he's talking about with his needs system is way too complex. It's in the same way
Yes.
that when you lock down in COVID and only people can go out who need to go out, that's an impossible thing to decide. Who needs to go out and what does that even mean? Like, do police people need to go out? Maybe. For some things, maybe not. Do people need to go to the grocery store? Do people need to then, if they're not going to the grocery store, deliver groceries?
Right. Well, and that's why I think he was making a point of adding vital to it, probably, to mean that these are the needs that are absolutely required. But I agree, it's just probably muddying the water. Whereas you should just maybe use the word
Right, but he's
need
not.
for your needs.
That's where, like, he's definitely not
Yeah.
just talking about food and shelter. Yeah.
No, I agree. Right. I already ceded that.
Also, I'm not. That isn't an argument against you, by the way. I didn't.
Oh, I don't care. Yeah. No, I feel like we've probably gone over this
Sure.
enough, and we've gone kind of long, and there's a few just last
Sure.
things I wanted to
No,
bring
no,
up. Sorry.
good.
I mean, did you feel like we came to a decent conclusion on that? I mean, you're not happy with how we both don't think that system could exist.
But I agree with you about the quantifying of needs. That makes sense.
Yeah, you can quantify needs, and actually, though, I wonder, I don't know if it's a bad thing to strive for. How about that? The pacification of existence.
Yeah, I do. But yes.
And the minimization of labor. The minimization of labor you think is a bad thing to strive for.
Minimization of labor. Yes.
Interesting. Well, we'll probably need
Yeah.
to debate that some other time. Okay. Why did I star that? I don't know. Double star. Oh, he has he very clearly defines pacified existence on page 235. The phrase conveys poorly enough the intent to sum up in one guiding idea the tabooed and ridiculed end of technology, the repressed final cause behind the scientific enterprise. And this is, if this final cause were to materialize and become effective, the logos of technics would open a universe of qualitatively different relations between man and man and man and nature.
Yep. Right.
Right. So I thought that was a very good summation of what pacified existence was. So I just wanted to get that into the ether. Okay. This is a big reason for the podcast for me. Is it's like it's a way of note taking. I was like, okay, now I can remember. This is where this was, right? Okay, so page 239. This was the great rationality of art thing. I just really like that. It's basically saying like the rationality of art, its ability to protect existence, to define yet unrealized possibilities, could then be envisaged as validated by and functioning in the scientific technological transformation of the world. So what I was trying to say is, the rationality of art is this ability to think about things that don't exist and then make them exist with science. Because a lot of the things that science has developed were magical and unthinkable just even a few decades ago. So, which is why I think he is, it's like me and him kind of see eye to eye in a lot of ways, and why I keep thinking he's probably agrees with how I think about consciousness, but maybe not. He was German, we already kind of talked about the truth of art thing, how art's going to be telling the truth in a rational society. I thought masses need to be dissolved into individuals. So self-determination will be real to the extent to which the masses have been dissolved into individuals. This is on 252. Liberated from all propaganda, indoctrination, and manipulation, capable of knowing and comprehending the facts and of evaluating the alternatives. In other words, society would be rational and free to the extent to which it is organized, sustained, and reproduced by an essentially new historical subject. So again, it's just consciousness. It's just consciousness.
The whole book can be summed up in one word.
Consciousness, man. The end.
Yeah.
That'll be my book.
Yeah,
I should write that book.
You should publish it and then sell it for
I'm going to do that.
$85.74 and hardcover.
Yeah. $85.74?
$85.74. I don't know. It's just a number.
Oh, okay. I thought it was like a ratio or something. Okay, I think those are all the things I wanted to highlight. Thank you. I see the floor.
I think that's good.
Oh,
what?
Oh, wait. No, oh, my God. Consciousness definition. Ring, 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 ring. Okay. In view of these characteristics, consciousness may well be called a disposition, propensity, or faculty. It is not one individual disposition or faculty among others, however, but in a strict sense, a general disposition which is common in various degrees to the individual members of one group, class, society. On these grounds, the distinction between true and false consciousness becomes meaningful. The former would synthesize the data of experience and concepts which reflect as fully and adequately as possible the given society and the given facts. This sociological definition is suggested not because of any prejudice in favor of sociology, but because of the factual ingression of society into the data of experience. Consequently, the repression of society and the formation of concepts is tantamount to an academic confinement of experience, a restriction of meaning. So here's what I would say about this. I would call it not false and true consciousness. I would call it that the people who have the, quote, false consciousnesses are just not they're at a lower level of reflection. They're not reflecting as critically. They're not as conscious, essentially. And the, quote, true consciousness are just individuals who are more conscious because they're thinking more critically. But this is why, it's all, But anyway, okay. So I think, now I see the floor.
Nice. Cool.
Get this floor away from me.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't have anything more. I'm good.
Yeah, we went, this was a long one. But hopefully a good one.
I don't
You got
know.
me
I
all
don't
in
know
my
if it was a
head
good
now,
one. I don't feel
consciously.
great about it.
How come? Yeah, don't tell me. Tell me why.
I just feel like we got real bogged down.
It was
and
me.
It was a lot my fault at the end there.
Yeah, for some reason I don't feel as bad about it.
Well, because
but
I
I'm
think it was my
wondering
fault.
why.
That's why I feel bad about it.
Oh, I see.
I think I got us
Well,
caught
I don't know though. I mean, we'll see.
in a trap. Yeah.
Oh, it's okay. I thought the Reddit
Yeah.
discussions were good though.
I wonder what I'll do this
Yeah.
week. Maybe I'll try a consciousness one this week. We'll see. We'll see if I get some good responses. But yeah. Yeah, I think that's it. Oh, we're doing repressive tolerance next week.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
It's an essay of his. It's online free. Cool. I don't know if there's probably a book of collected essays if you want to get that instead.
No, I'll just read the
Okay.
online version.
Sounds good. All right, we did it. Goodbye.
Sweet. See ya. Okay.
And recording.
Okay. Yeah, no, it was, let me try to find it. It was kind of funny. This is another Reddit conversation where I felt like you were talking to him or her or them.
Everyone on Reddit's a him.
No, that's not true at all, actually.
No, that's not.
There's a lot of, anyway, but let me try to find it. I think it was in the the intellectual dark web.
Nice.
Oh, wow, it's already got 77 comments. Jeez, it's cooking right now, dude. As we speak, it's cooking. I don't even know if I'll be able to find it anymore. People are just talking to themselves, which makes sense because your question was a definition question. So it goes to our point, is that if you ask a definition question on Reddit, you are just asking for debate.
Oh, this was my capitalist, socialist, left, right thing. Yeah, this wasn't even related to the podcast. I was just doing it as an experiment.
That's right. Yeah, actually, honestly, I think it would be kind of interesting to read some of those responses. People had interesting ones. Like one person said left was people want property to be, I think, universal.
Right.
And then the right was, private property.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know if hang on, let me.
But I don't think I have responded to anybody on this topic.
No, I'm reading some responses that you did as we speak. I just can't. Oh, maybe it was critical theory.
But I didn't respond on this topic at all.
I was just reading some of your responses. Okay. It was in the Ask Libertarians.
Okay.
And it was under the is there value in Marxian is there value in the Marxian idea of the abolition of labor? And you personally find the notion, yeah, we already know how you feel. But anyway, this person said to yours, is there value in Marx? No. Is there value in the Marxian idea of the abolition of labor? No. Your arguments seem very emotional. Stop that. That's what they
That was fun.
That's what they said. And then you said, which arguments are emotional and what should I stop? And they said, you're making the argument that people work for a sense of pride. Do you work for a sense of pride? And then you said, you think some. But the point is, I feel like they think that you're saying something you're not.
Yeah,
don't
I know.
You?
Yep. Yeah, it happens a lot.
And then they said, I believe we are searching for happiness, and you must procure a means of happiness. Happiness takes resources, so you must procure resources. And luckily, we are not alone, so we work together to procure resources. And you said, I agree, and that was it. But I just thought that was a funny interaction because it was like they were like, your arguments sound emotional. Stop it.
Right. Yeah, they came in
Stop
kind of
that.
hot.
But it's like, what? You weren't making an argument for that, right?
No,
Whoever
I don't
they
think
were-
so.
Yeah. So anyway, I just thought that was a funny exchange.
It was a pretty funny one.
Cool. Okay. I don't know what. Yeah, I'll put this somewhere.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. That's all.